Hi, this is Sean Hafer, and this tutorial is about isometric drawing in Adobe Illustrator. So to start off, Illustrator is not a CAD program, like computer-aided design program in the sense of engineering, technical drawing, etc., for architecture, engineering, all of that. But we can do a lot of the things in here that a CAD program would use. Now, CAD programs usually have many more tools for creating more accurate, for example, ellipses based on 2 points or 3 points compared to us just having sort of our ellipse tool. Since we have the Creative Cloud, this is something we can use. We have Illustrator with Creative Cloud. So this is a example of how I would show this. Now, I'm old enough where I did all of this on paper with compass and triangles and a T-square and all of that. So I'll kind of describe a little bit about how that would have worked then, but we'll get it just going so we can sort of create these different shapes here inside of Illustrator. I've created this template here, so you can look at that, and we've got our guide set, and we're going to create a isometric cube, a right angle solid, a pyramid, and ellipses, right? So we're going to put our 3 ellipses on the surfaces of our 3 faces of our cube that we can see. And if I start out, I can look and see, I've got the template here. If I go to my layers, we've got our sort of name down here, which has that info. We've got our guides, and then we've got our drawing layer, which we'll draw on, and these 3 are locked. And then I've got the measurements here. So if you want to see what we're doing, basically everything is going to be based off of a 2-inch cube, and we'll go from there. It's a little, I just placed this, so it's a little fuzzy, but it'll be good enough for us for what we're doing. All right, so I'm going to hit my old Control or Command 0 to zoom to the artboard, and we'll get started. So when we're talking about isometric in this case, we're going to base this on a 30-degree angle. This is not a perspective drawing like a 1 point or 2 point or 3 point perspective. This is just creating an isometric where we'll use a 30-degree angle for our axes. And then from there, we'll also then go and use our true measurements so we can have our 2-inch cube will be 2 inches on each side. If we were doing this in 2-point perspective and we had our 1-point perspective where we have vanishing point, those would not be 2 inches. They would get smaller as they get further away from our point of view. So in this case, we're doing an isometric based on a 30-degree angle, and we'll go for there. So for example, the main tools I'm going to use in this, we'll just go ahead and I'll show if I had a baseline here, I'm just going to my line tool and I draw a baseline here, and I'm going to hit my controller command just to kick out of there and back to my line tool if I find that center point here. Now, if I click to draw a line and I know I need a 2-inch line for the base of my cube, or just a 30-degree line. Let's just say that for now. I can just type in my 30 degrees. We can see it's heading that direction. And I could say, let's make it 3 inches and hit OK. Now, one of the things Illustrator does when we look at that line, even though we just said 3 inches, if we come up here to its width and height, its width now says 2.5981. Now that issue comes into play because from this point down to here, so if we think of that triangle, this bottom line is how it's measuring this width, right? You have to get used to sort of not looking at that. If we click our little ellipses here, we can see here we've got our actual line length, and that's 3 inches. Okay, so that's where you can double check what's going on, and there's our degrees. It's a 30-degree line at 3 inches. So just remember that, okay? So that's in our more options here. So if I come back in here and I wanted to create our other line, right? So again, I could just hold down my control so I get out of that tool so I can create a new one. Go back to that same anchor. Now, in this case, I want to draw not at 30 degrees, but we want to come over. You want to remember we've got sort of 180 degrees, right, is our hemisphere, 360 degrees in a circle. So if we do 150, so basically 180 minus 30, that would give us our opposite line. So if I hit OK, right, so now we've got 30 degrees here and 30 degrees here. So that's all I did to create our little template here in our guides. So just for that understanding, I set up the 30 degrees. You can create a 30-degree grid. You can find those sometimes on the web somewhere. You can do a lot of things and then use that to snap to. I just went ahead and created these guides. So once you understand the sort of theory of what's happening here, you can get on to sort of drawing this. So remember, though, the big thing is, if you want to see your actual length, make sure you come over to your actual line length. Don't get worried when you see this width says 2.5981 when we know it should be 3. So we can't come up here if we want to see that info. Now transform will give us basically this same info here, but if we come over here to shape, we can now see we've got our 150 degrees and 3 inches. All right, so that's there. Okay, cool. So let's get into some construction. So I'm going to go hit V for my selection tool, grab these two, and then just delete that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and move over using my space bar. And let's turn on our layer with our measurements real quick just to double check. I know this is a 2-inch cube, so that's fine. So we're going to start off with our 2-inch cube, and then we'll move over to our right angle sort of object over here, our solid. All right, so we'll go start out here, our cubes in our guide, so we know we want to draw it there. And I'm in my drawing layer, and let's just start out here. Now, since I have these set up, I know this is 2 inches, but just to double check, we can come in, click our anchor, draw 2 inches, either 150 or 30, whichever you want to do, and then there we go. All right, so I'm going to trust that that is the case. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and draw down here. Now, you can go into your preferences and you could set your snaps to 30 degrees. Sometimes that doesn't work with the line tool. It only works with like the pen tool. So again, for this, we'll just do it this way and we'll go from here. So we know we're just doing a 2-inch square. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these off again, just so they're out of my way. Our measurements layer. All right, so now, since everything is 2 inches, we're not utilizing vanishing points. So this won't be a smaller size because it's vanishing into the distance in true perspective. So what we're doing here, we can just draw another 2-inch line. So I could come up here, and I want to do this time, let's do a 90, right? So it's straight up and down, 2 inches, hit OK. And all of these are just stroke, black stroke, 1 point. And then if I want, I could draw another one, or I could just start dragging, hold down Option or Alt, and snap to where I get to that point and let go. And that makes a copy for me. I could do the same thing here, or I could come down if I want. Again, just go into my line tool by hitting my slash tool, boom, 2 inches, 90, cool. And then we can just go through and draw. Snap to each thing. Now remember, I've got my smart guides on. If you don't see your smart guides, go to your view, and you should have your smart guides right here. Control or Command U if you don't see those, and that'll get that going for you. And then again, just creating this. Now here, we could do the same thing. We could draw those, or I could copy and paste, either way. So in this case, I'm going to come up here. That's going to be my 30 degree. And we can now also go from there if we want and just draw our other, because we know that's correct. All right, so in that case, that's our cube. All right, so we can clean up. We can come in here and maybe select these two. Do a Control or Command J to join those. Clean up that corner. Same thing down here. All right, then we can get some nicer corners there. So if we come up here now, same thing. And joining them up to clean up. Okay, so that's a nice clean isometric cube. Now let's move on to the right angle solid. So if we look at that, let's pull open our measurements real quick. So we've got 2 inches, 2 inches. So it's all inside that same cube, but 3/4 and 3/4 here. So again, we're going to use these real measurements because we're not working in perspective. So I could go ahead and then come here. Now, if you wanted, you could drag over your cube and create a new one. But I'm going to go and just sort of start cutting and things there. But I'm going to start fresh just to keep it moving. So we'll come in here. I know this is right, so I'm going to go to my intersect. And same thing here. Start with our base. We're 2 inches. 2 inches. Make sure you're on anchor or intersect right there, and we should be good. So we know now here this needs to be 3/4 of an inch, 90 degrees. So 0.75, and we'll make that 90. Great. And now if we want, we could just go ahead and select that. Hold down our Option or Alt. Find that. So we hit the intersect, let go. Same thing over here. Option, Alt, get our intersect, and we're good to go there. Okay. So now that is our first bit. So we know we could come in here and connect this one here. And this should be 2 inches. You can see as I'm drawing there, the D right there, 2 inches on our little pop-up there. All right. So just to double check, let's zoom in a little. Make sure our lines are good to go. Yep, snap to anchor. And we're good there too. Snap to anchor. All right. So now if we zoom out a little here, I'm just Command or Control minus sign. So if we come in here now, we know we've got to go up 1.25 inches. So 1.25 inches in our 30 degrees. So we could do that here. Start with our anchor. 1.25 and at 30. All right, and that should be good. Hit OK. That's that one. Again, same thing. If you want to go to your, we could create another one right here by just clicking. It's all set up again, and we're there. So come over here, create that line very simply. Make sure we're snapped to anchor. And now we could go up. If we look there, 1.25 up. Same thing. I'm going to hold down my Command or Control just so I deselect. Release that, I'm back to my line segment tool. So here we're going 90 degrees, 1.25 at 90, straight up and down. Same thing here. Since we got it selected, it's already there, boom. We've got that, and now we can connect those two. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. All right, and then we can come up here if we want and draw our 30 degrees coming out here, and we know that's 0.75, right? So deselect that. 0.75, 3/4 of an inch at 30 degrees, and we can hit OK. Now on this one down here, I'd copy that over, just not even thinking. If I select it with a selection tool, I can just go ahead and stretch that up, find that snap, and not have to delete and redraw that or draw another little segment there, and that should be fine. And then these last two lines, this one here, same thing. We've got 0.75 at 30. We just did that. Perfect. And back to our line segment tool, final back line. All right. Now, if we wanted to create our hidden lines, we could do that, but we don't really necessarily need to in this case. So there's that. We could clean up those corners to get it looking a little better, but that's our right angle solid. So with this pentagonal pyramid, basically in this case, this pyramid is based on the center point being right at our 2-inch point, and it's 1 inch in from our base. So if we come in here, we could say we've got our start our lines, same thing. All right. And I'm going to do my other one here. I know these are correct, so I'm not going to worry about that. Again, we could have typed them in. So if I look, now what I want to do, let's go ahead and create our other sort of 2 lines here. So I'm going to go, this is going to be our base of our pyramid. So we know that's 150, right? Oops, sorry. 150 would be, so we know we need 30 for that one. And if we come over to this one, we can either draw it or type in 150, 180 minus 30. Okay, now that's our base of our pyramid. Now we can find our center, so we could come across here. Again, if we're just creating sort of a guide. And we know now this would be our center point of where our pyramid would be. So we know that is 2 inches off the ground, right? So we could do this a couple ways. We could come up here. We could just do our 2-inch cube. So we can inscribe that. So length 2, and let's give that our old 90 degrees. Hit OK. And we could do the same thing here. If I'm in my line segment tool, start to draw, get my little snap happening so I can just figure that out. Hold down Shift, got the intersect. We can see right there the 2 inches, 90 degrees, perfect. And same thing, if we go this, we know this is 2 inches, right? And so we could just click here and do our 2 inches. All right, so then this would be our top. Come in here, draw, boom. Right, this is our top. Of our cube. And if we do our little cross here, our little bisection to figure out where we are, now we could come in here. This would be our center point of our cube. So if we come in, go back to our deselect everything, that's our center point. I could draw one to here. This one is fine. And then do our last one from the corner up to the center, right? So our cube is just these in here. So I could come in, use my selection tool, get rid of, if I wanted to turn these into guides so we could see them, we could just select boom, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and if we made guides, so I'm going to go to View, Guides, Make Guides. Remember, that's Command 5. And I could do the rest. Shift select all these that we don't need to see. And maybe I'll go ahead and grab that one as well. Command 5, and then I can just redraw my center line. All right, and that is our pyramid. And then the last one, this one is a little, I mean, the main thing here is understanding how it's created, because when we start drawing objects in perspective, a lot of times you may have a cylindrical object or a rounded object, and you need to know how that fits inside a cube or a rectilinear box, something like that, so that you can kind of create your shape with correct perspective once we start getting into that. So a big part of this is knowing how this is created. So again, if we kind of looked at the days when we would draw these with our compass, etc., we could come in here, and what we would do is we draw our initial isometric cube, and we would create our cross sections so we could find our center point. But we'd also go from each corner, our corner here, to the midpoint of the edges here. Then we do the same thing from the bottom to go up to our midpoints of those faces. And where those intersections happen, those are where we would take a compass and strike an arc. So we'd measure from the center of that intersection down to that midpoint, and that would create our radius to draw that part of our arc. Same thing over here. We would go from here to this point and then draw our arc from point to point using that as a radius, right? That creates that arc, those two. Then we would take this one from our corner points and we would go the same thing. We'd create a radius all the way to that midpoint, draw. So again, you can see where that full circle would be. That's what these dotted lines I drew are. But with that, we'd go here and do the same thing. From these two midpoints of our edges, we'd go and draw that arc. And then the same thing here. We'd start down at this corner, use this as our radius, right? So we're using that as our radius, thinking this would draw this whole circle. But then we would just go up to that same midpoint of that side to this edge and strike that arc, creating that ellipse, because those would run tangent to each other and meet up perfectly. So that's the theory behind it, and that's how you would do it. So again, anytime when you've got this, if you think about the midpoints of your edges, creating those, then that creates your places where you can then create your center points for the radii you'll need. All right. And then, or if you draw this, you can just see that ellipse is going to lay and contact on all four of these points. Okay. So let me jump back here. We're going to look at this last one with our ellipses, and we can see, let's see what we're doing there. So again, we just need first off our cube, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my line tool again, and let's just 2 inches, 90 for our center point. And I'm just going to draw these, but we know how we would create them. Go to the anchor. Go to the anchor point here. Connect, make sure you're on the anchor. Same thing here. Want to go ahead and draw our 90 degrees. Same thing here. And let's connect. That'll be our 150. Right, 180 minus 30, and this one will be our 30. All right, so we've got our cube, this inscription to create our guidelines. So if we go ahead, we can start with our cross to create our center midpoint. All right. Okay, so if I zoom in, now we've got this area here. So if I look over here, we can see, we've got our points. Now, sometimes our snapping may not be. Let's make sure everything is lined up. And like I said earlier, something like CAD is a little cleaner in here than this, but that's okay. So if we're in here, we can now say, all right, we've got our intersection point here. So to make sure I'm on that, I'm going to go ahead and go to my segment tool and go make sure I'm on that intersect and go out here. Now you can see I'm snapping to a whole bunch of different things. All right. So to make sure that this is correct, I'm going to go ahead and select this path, and we can see there's my intersection there. And I could do a couple things. So we know that's our center point. Okay, so when if I'm trying to do this line, and I'm here, and you're seeing I'm getting intersects with all these guides up here. I mean, I can try and do this, but I don't know exactly where it is. There's too many things to snap to. So let's get rid of some of those options by just turning off our guides. And now I can come in, and if I select that path, and I'm in my line tool, if I start drawing that center point of my path that I selected, my line is still there. Now I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do it again. But remember, if you hold down Option or Alt, it'll draw from the center. So now I can see I snap to center. Great. Now I'm just going to hit my Command or Control, get rid of that. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Select this path, go to my center, start drawing. Hold on Alt. I can see that's my center. And I've got it. Okay, so now I know those are all right on. If I zoom in, we should see a nice clean center point. It's easy to, if you accidentally snap to other things, to have it just a little off, and then your ellipse won't draw correctly. Okay, cool. So now if I look at this, I can just draw the rest of my guidelines up here. So I could say this one here to here. Make sure you're on the anchor. Same thing here, anchor to anchor. Anchor to intersect, and anchor to intersect. Great. So now we've got our guides. For the final drawing, you would want to go ahead and change these. So if I wanted to, I could create, maybe I come into this one, select it, go over to my stroke, click on it so we can see what our options are. And we do a dashed line. And I want to do this something like maybe, let's try 4 points. Maybe even a little smaller. 3. And we could come in here. I'm going to go to my sort of align to the corners, pass so it's nice and clean. And then bring that down maybe to a half a point. Right? So it's a nice light line. And then for that stroke, we could go ahead and click on our stroke and maybe grab, a light green here. Maybe a little darker. There we go, since it's so light. Great. And now if we click off of that, we can see we've got our green. Actually, I think it is that lighter one. There we go. Do that lighter green. Perfect. All right. So we got that. Then you could do the same thing. Now remember, if you've got certain ones are going to be that. So then for the others, we do this, shift select that, right? So we've got them. Again, just hit I for your eyedropper tool, grab that, and then you'll get your line weights copied over and your dotted lines. And for this one here, we could do the same thing. Let's go ahead and take that one. Since it looks like we could just do our eye, grab that one, but then we can come in here and change our color. And maybe we just go to a reddish orange, click on that, and we've got that. And then we could do the same thing with those lines that we need. Just select and shift. Right, eyedropper or eye, and grab that one as our example. And then you can see that's where we can get our construction lines. And again, this one I missed, so and that's one of our green ones. Great. Okay, so that's where that would be. And then if we come in here, we could say, let's draw our ellipse. Again, we're not going to strike arcs. We don't have we have an arc tool, but we can't really go from a certain radius at a certain point. So we're just going to go ahead and use the ellipse tool. And remember, when we're using the ellipse tool, let me go back to my 1 point and make this black. And with that, I'm going to go to my center point, my intersect, start drawing, hold down my Alt or Option key, And we can't easily snap, but we know we want to be lined up right in there. And we can let go. And then just select off and see where we look. And that looks pretty good. Again, I've got my dashed line, so I could go ahead with that selected, do my eyedropper tool, and grab that straight line. And we can do the same for the others. So again, you would just come from here, create your cross section so you find your center point, and then draw your lines. So with this one, it'd be pretty easy to find the midsection because we can just do straight down, and that'll hit right at that intersect. Same thing over here. And we can create our lines and go there. All right, well, I hope this was helpful. This is all, again, on an 11 by 17. They've got a little naming down here, so you can put your name in. And that is that. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.